fantasy short stories. An Interlude of Intrigue, A Tale of Three Kings, by Lesley Herron. Chapter 9, Elegy. If anyone ever tells you that ruling is easy, know that they are lying. I can tell you from experience that they are wrong. From the constant threat from neighbouring lands, the council perpetually scheming behind my back, to the mountains of tedious paperwork dealing with every issue that sprang up in my kingdom, I rose to the challenge best I could. But despite my tireless efforts to make Ebra a safe place for everyone, there were always those that were overlooked, forgotten. I'm sure you know by now the tale of the Twisted, of how Rivaria's perversion of their original forms rendered their flesh into grotesque mockeries of Diara's children. Because of this, they have ever been viewed as a lower-class race, constantly cast away and ostracized by civilization. A sentiment, unfortunately, upheld by my father and seconded by Lucian, even my mother, bless her. But Verin and I grew up half-human. We were looked down upon by most pure fae, yet unaccepted in the eyes of mankind. I like to think that we partially understood their plight, albeit to a far lesser degree. But where my brother and I prospered, the Twisted remained broken and suppressed. They were not allowed to hold land, or even to earn a wage. They were cast out of society merely for their appearances. Is it any wonder that they were driven to prey upon those who banished them? Banditry is the last recourse for the desperate, and so any Twisted that weren't killed on sight were imprisoned for the crimes of their brethren or forced into positions of servitude. They would spend their lives toiling away in the mines and quarries for no reward, or cleaning up after those who could afford to purchase their contracts. There is no question. I had failed them. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythmic sound of a metal-tipped cane clacking against hard floor echoed off the neatly carved walls of the stone cave. An ancient, squat little goblin, dressed in lavish robes, teetered her way towards the cell bars that held her most recent tenants. She stopped before them, wrapping one tiny hand around the limestone barrier. "Well, well, well. How's my favorite prisoner doing today?" With a heavy sigh, Undine looked up from her bland bowl of gruel. "He is cranky, as usual." She put her fingers into the food and scooped out another glob of the sticky mess, letting it mull around her teeth before swallowing. "He was able to take a few steps today and keep down several mouthfuls of this..." She let the excess slide off her hand and back into the bowl. "Mush, you call food? I would say an overall improvement."
Stop talking about me like I'm not here."
With a pained effort, Elias propped himself up in his makeshift cot, leaning heavily against the stone wall. The room swam as waves of nausea overwhelmed him. His eyes clenched against the vertigo, and he focused on calming his stomach. He had lost track of the days wasted suffering in a cramped jail cell, having spent them slipping in and out of unconsciousness. His body was fatigued and sore, and he couldn't rid himself of the painful thrumming in his head. The goblin let out a bark of laughter as she leaned against her walking stick. "Sorry, kid. Force a habit after staring at your lifeless corpse for 4 weeks. You're lucky to be alive." She produced a long smoking pipe from her robes and pushed the end into her mouth. For now, anyway." With a snap of her fingers, she produced a flame and began to stoke a fire in the chamber of the stummel.
A nauseating silence sat ill between the three of them before Elias spoke.
You threaten my life daily, but you've yet to tell us what you want, or who you even are.
He opened his eyes to match the sinister yellow gaze staring back at him.
Every day you keep us here is another day the Brotherhood continues to march across my kingdom. My people need me.
Coarse laughter reverberated and bounced around the stone chamber.
I'm not gonna kill you, unless that's what will get me the biggest benefit in the end.
She took in a long puff from her pipe before letting it slowly exhale from her nostrils. That smile returned to her face.
And as for your quest to destroy the Brotherhood, that task is gonna be a bit more difficult now. It ain't your kingdom no more.
Dragging a hand across his mouth, Elias felt his pulse quicken. It was only a matter of time before they declared him dead, but even this was much too soon.
Who is to take my place?
Smoke curled upwards from the goblin's wide smile.
Ebra is safe in the hands of King Herron and his trusted advisor, Lucian, voted in unanimously by the council.
A pit sank into his gut, and Elias was sure the overwhelming urge to vomit had nothing to do with his vertigo.
What of my wife, the Queen?
The only response was a slight shrug of her shoulders as the creature took in another puff of toxic smoke. Rallying himself and his nerves with a deep breath, Elias forced himself to his feet.
All the more reason for me to leave this cage and return to my kingdom.
He stumbled in the direction of the bars, his hands catching hold of them before he completely collapsed. A deep, sinister chuckle rattled past gold-capped teeth.
You're not listening, kid. You're no longer king. Even if you return to Ebonvane, the tide has shifted. Your tribunal would vote to strip you of your right to rule. The time of holding borders is past. Now all the talk is of diplomacy.
Her voice lost its air of amusement.
We both know that ain't exactly your forte, especially now with that barely functioning brain.
She pointed up at him with a long finger.
Herron is king. Long may he reign.
A blow to his ego for sure. Elias collapsed down to his knees. If he could just get the pain in his head to subside, he was sure he could cobble together a plan. He frowned a little as he looked up.
You have people, soldiers. I've seen them. Allow me to use them to take back Fort Ironhill, and I will reward you. King or not, it isn't too late to save our people.
The creature gave one final drag of her pipe.
Our people?
She let the smoke billow out of her upturned mouth, a snarl forming on her face.
Our people? You remember who, or rather, what you're talking to, don't you?
The goblin glanced towards the dryad, who gave a slight shake of her head before returning to her gruel. Elias frowned.
I have always felt for the plight of the twisted. I have long thought that your kind should be brought into the fold.
Yes, I bet you have. Let me guess. When you were little, you used to walk around your castle making friends with all the twisted slaves. Oh, sorry, servants that cleaned up after you. Promised them time and time again that one day, when you were king, things would change. You would free them all.
Elias blinked.
Yes, I did. How did you...
And then Zelfir died, and you became king, just like you always wanted. But did you remember those little servants? Did you keep your promise? Did you set them free? Did you even help them at all?
Elias sank farther down the bars until he was sat completely on the floor. He winced against a painful throb as he scoured his sore and tired mind.
No!
The goblin tucked her pipe back into her robe and stuck her walking stick through the bars to jab the man in the chest.
You never did.
Sabine?
The goblin scowled up at him.
Ha! Now he remembers. Your brain really is broken.
It was definitely her. He could see her face clear as day, hauling wood for the fires or gathering dishes from the long dining tables. She used to sneak him extra snacks when his mother wasn't looking. He had not recognized her without the drab, gray attire of the indentured servants.
I haven't seen you in years. Where have you been?
Sabine snarled.
Figures you wouldn't even notice. You were too busy playing soldier. Lucian purged the castle of any twisted servants after your father died. I escaped the mines not long after. I've been fighting ever since to give my people the life you promised them. And now you want to cut them off to fight and die in some needless battle for a country that considers their very existence deplorable?
Elias felt his gut sour as shame crept up his throat like bile.
You're right, Sabine. I failed you. But help me take back our country, and we will work towards making that promise a reality.
Even if I believed you, I only have a few bodies that know how to fight. If you didn't stand a chance against the Brotherhood with 1,000 skilled soldiers, what good will a few hundred do you?
She shook her head.
Nah, I'm not gonna let you lead my people like lambs to the slaughter.
Elias slammed his hand against the bars as he let out a cry of frustration.
So you plan on just letting me rot in here? Or using me as a bargaining chip to gain favor with my brothers?
There was a rumble of footsteps, and a large troll lumbered up behind the small goblin, wielding a monster-sized cleaver. It let out a low, angry growl, and Elias leaned back away from the bars, but didn't loosen his grip around them. Sabine put her hand up, and with a flick of her wrist, waved off the guard behind her.
Your brothers, or the humans, or the Archbishop, whoever wins in the end, you all treat my kind the same, so why should I care who rules?
Elias frowned. He needed to convince her he was the better choice.
If I was to return, the council would have to convene to vote on my right to rule. You say they would vote against me, but I'm not so sure.
He clenched his eyes around a painful throb in his head.
They are cowardly old men, and cowards are easily swayed by a show of force.
And what show of force is a brain-addled half-elf and a dryad gonna do?
Sabine turned a pace, but bumped into the massive wall of muscle that was her guard. She swatted at his tree-trunk legs with her walking stick.
Get out of here, you brute! Can't you see I'm negotiating?
Negotiation. So it was just a matter of price. Elias pushed his forehead against the cold bars, which brought some measure of relief from the heat radiating off his skin. It was so hard to think. What could he even offer her? Using what little strength was left in him, he struggled to his feet. Through the pain that blurred his vision, tears began to leak from his eyes.
I can't lose my kingdom to the tyranny of a false god and the rule of man.
He looked up, his voice losing its edge.
My people need me. Your people need me. Please, help me take back my country. I will do anything.
Sabine slowly turned on the spot. She had waited over a month for those words.
Let's assume I know a way to help you reclaim your throne. What will you give me in return?
A wave of exhaustion hit him, and Elias felt the ground sway beneath his feet. His fingers tightened on the bars to keep him steady, but he clenched his eyes against the vertigo that threatened to upturn his stomach.
I can offer you full citizenship. You would no longer be considered a second-class citizen.
Sabine stabbed at the ground with the tip of her cane.
You can do better.
And lands. Lands enough to make you a lady, a baroness, and as such, grant you a seat on my council.
Sabine nodded to herself slowly.
Acceptable. Shake on it. Shake on it, and we have a deal.
She thrust her tiny hand between the bars, offering it to the king. It was no use. Elias couldn't calm the pain in his head. He had barely wrapped his fingers around the tiny goblins before he was forced to lurch away from her, vomiting the contents of his meal into the corner. His vision blurred again as he struggled to catch his breath. He didn't turn to face her as he asked,
"Then you will rally your forces?"
I already told you I ain't letting any of my people die for your stupid war.
A long smile pulled across Sabine's face.
But I know someone who can grant you what you seek, for a price.
Running the back of his hand across his mouth, Elias turned to look at the small goblin with hesitation.
What kind of price?
Don't worry about it. We'll cross that bridge later. After all, you said you'd do anything, right?
She let out a mirthless chuckle before turning her attention to the dryad.
For now, just one question. How good are you at traversing swamps?
An Interlude of Intrigue, A Tale of Three Kings, is book 3.5 by Lesley Herron, a short novella to set the stage for the upcoming book 4 of the series. If you would like to listen to the first 3 books, please be sure to check the links in the description. And stay tuned every few weeks to hear the latest chapters as they are being written and recorded. We hope you enjoyed the story. I'm Chris Herron, and that's it for today's Tall Tale TV.